recruitment. Last fall, I assembled an enrollment and retention task force led by Sally Honeycutt, who's in the back of the room. And they just issued a report, which is available on the CHS website, that delved deeper into the enrollment challenges we face as an institution and has very specific recommendations that we're putting into place. And if you haven't had the opportunity to read it yet, and there's a link to a comment form where you can offer suggestions or become engaged with what will be now the implementation phase of that, I certainly encourage you to do that. We're also making sure that we build many of those recommendations into our strategic planning process, because we know that they are crucial to what we are as an institution. This year, we also issued re-engagement grants to 28 different faculty members who proposed really amazing programs. Some of them are presenters, many of them are in this room, and we want them, and they are actively thinking about new ways to address issues of student success, to innovate in the classroom, to innovate in the new spaces we'll have with the new STEM building, and really bring our teaching to the next level. We will issue another round of grants. We're going to call them impact grants, because as Sarah pointed out to me, we can't keep re-engaging. At some point, we just have to be engaged, right, and keep moving forward. But I really see that as an important sort of laddering process where we have successive cohorts of faculty working collaboratively within a cohort and collaboratively with previous and successive cohorts to continue to move this really important activity forward. These grants are also building on the earlier and really important and continuing work done by the Leaders for Inclusive Excellence. Again, when I look around this room, I see people who have participated in both of those activities. The commonality across all these efforts are foundational elements of our interaction with students, right? Again, to think about what Dr. Susan Barber said earlier this week. And these elements include things that I think we all know, but we need to always articulate and make visible. The need to increase student sense of belonging, re-engaging them through innovative classes, materials, and modalities. And I think materials is an interesting thing. You know, you notice there's a 3D bone back there on the back table. Bernard will be talking about that subsequently. Those are some of the materials. I see another colleague in the back who works on manuscripts. I mean, materials run the gamut, guiding them toward resources that will help them with learning success, translating the value of higher education. And certainly there's never been a more important time for us all to do that, and helping them see clear career paths within their areas of interest, which may diverge, who knows where they're going to go. And having that realm of possibility is part of helping them lead through that. Now, when I talk to faculty and sometimes to chairs about integrating innovative methods into their teaching, after they sometimes roll their eyes, no one in this room would do that, of course, they characterize it as a request to somehow do something more, that I'm asking them to do something extra, that it's an additional responsibility on an already burdened faculty member. And I resist that idea, and I would encourage you to resist that as well. I think what we're inviting you to do is reflect on what you're currently doing, consider how it could be modified to meet the needs of what we know are changing students, and then potentially modify what it is that you're doing to reflect that. So unless that we, and by we, I mean all of us in this room, all of us teaching in the College of Humanities and Sciences, work to sort of shift our mindset. Instead of thinking about this as something more, think about it as something that is integrated naturally, right? That is baked into what we're doing in the classroom. And that's the only way we're going to be able to shift the culture. And again, I know I'm preaching to the choir here. You're all here because you believe in this mission and you understand the importance of it. But it's essential that we recognize that it's not something more, but rather part of it has to be intrinsic in terms of what it is that we're doing. The benefits of integrating these types of innovative teaching practices are multiple, right? It puts very much into practice the language about teaching that we have throughout our mission statement. It improves the success of our students and in turn, our ability to retain them and help them change the path of our lives, which is why we're all here, right? That's why they come to us. That's why we engage with them on a regular basis. And it helps us welcome as well, for those of you who are part of have been involved in the HHMI element, it helps us welcome the missing millions, those historically marginalized students who, for example, are not adequately represented in STEM fields. When Dr. Pathanathan, who's the director of the National Science Foundation, visited us in February, he identified VCU as an institution that specifically embraces talent and allows access to the university in ways that many other institutions don't, right? That we're an opportunity institution. And this is part and parcel of that. That's why we are all here in this institution and in this room this morning. Today, you're going to hear from many of your colleagues about the work they're doing around inclusive pedagogy, innovative teaching, and student engagement. So I encourage you to take notes, share ideas, meet new people. And I also want to reiterate not only how, of course, upper administration is imitating this and trying to replicate some of the elements of the summit, but how engaged Provost Soteropoulos is. He wanted to be here this morning to also offer welcoming comments, but he is in Qatar. But he wanted me to specifically say how excited he is and how supportive he is about both this summit, but more broadly, how he recognizes and supports the student engagement activities that we are, again, really leading the charge on. And he looks forward to seeing the results of our innovative teaching practices. Before I turn the mic over, I want to thank our two keynote speakers who will appear over the next 2 days, Dr. Lisa Sun, Dr. Nate Brown, for sharing their scholarship with us. I want to thank the sponsors. As I said to someone who said breakfast, yes, well, the college is not paying for this breakfast. I want to be very clear. We thank the generous support of the VCU Hughes Medical Institute Inclusive Excellence Project, the First Generation Student Success and Research Center, and the Department of Mathematics and Applied Mathematics for their co-sponsorship of this summit. I also want to thank very specifically Sarah Golding, Ellen Carpenter, and Chris Burdett for putting this program together, for reaching out to all of you and making sure that you're here. And I also want to thank Alexis Fink, Arda Athman, and Kelsey Capiello for their assistance in planning the nuts and bolts. That's why you have the coffee, and there's more out there if you need it. That's why you have the breakfast. And so we're really thankful of the team that put this together. And we're particularly thankful for you being here, for your demonstrating your support and your recognition that this is an important element of this college and of the university as a whole. So I hope you have a great 2 days. I'm going to be popping in and out, and I look forward to hearing panels, to seeing all of you, and to hearing what you learn and take away from this great experience. So thank you again for being here.
Okay, so the first thing I did was stop my computer timing out, and it's still timed out. So, okay. Thank you, Catherine, for your inspiring remarks. I hope that we can live up to those expectations today. As we know, everybody, it is Thursday. It is a heavy teaching day. Everybody is going to be coming and going through the day. So no worries. We're just going to kind of power through. We have tried to make the transitions of the day line up with the class schedule a little bit, but that's almost impossible, right? There's never a good day to do something like this, but it seems like we've got enough people here to have a great day. We are recording via Zoom over here, and there were webinar links sent out to the 3 keynotes to our institutional partners through the other projects. So it's really not being broadcast to VCU as much as outside, okay? So with that, we will move on to our first talk, which is from the VCU HHMI project. And I am actually your introduction for that. So I will go ahead. So I think Catherine kind of set this slide up perfectly, right? We have retention issues. We know we have retention issues. We have disparities and issues with our students. And if we just sit here and do nothing, magic is not going to happen. So we've got to do something. And as Dr. Rao said to Faculty Senate, we have to move forward and do things differently. We can't just do things the same way that we have always done. The problem is that there are disparities in outcomes for students from underrepresented groups. These disparities, you see them in DFW rates, you see them in attrition, retention, graduation, time to graduation. This is not just VCU. This is a national problem. It was a national problem pre-COVID. It was exaggerated by COVID, right? Particularly in the STEM fields, this poses a national workforce development issue as our minority population becomes a majority population. We're simply not training enough people for the jobs to keep America at the forefront of technology. Literature clearly indicates a relationship between students and faculty and how that contributes to students' sense of belonging. Sense of belonging is part of Maslow's needs. In order for a student to learn, they have to feel like they belong. Some of these things that you see on this triangle on the side, and you might not be able to read them, we can't control physiological need. We can't necessarily control that they have a safe place to live or that they have food to eat. We can't necessarily control their safety outside of our classrooms, but we can influence their belonging in our classrooms and help and promote their self-esteem to lead the students to be able to appropriately learn. In 2015, the Howard Hughes Medical Institute, which is a very large $57 billion endowment to promote STEM, both education and science. In 2015, HHMI recognized that funding students and scientists wasn't going to be the way that we were going to change the future, that we needed to change structures of higher education to be able to adapt to the student population that we need to train, okay? And with that, they released a funding mechanism. They invited 600 schools in America to apply for funding to create institutional change that didn't focus on fixing students, but fixing the institution that those students come to. We were one of those schools that was invited to apply. In June 12th, 2015 was the first time that we met in a room with campus partners from all across VCU to think about what we could propose to HHMI to be able to garner this money to make institutional change at VCU. Originally, that team was led by Scott Gronert, who many of you will remember was our associate dean and chair of chemistry at the time, and Roz Hargraves from engineering. Both of them have now moved on to other institutions. Allison and I were part of the original team, and many other people contributed to this work. We didn't get the grant the first time. It took us a second attempt, but we received the money in 2017 or 18, September 2018. We were one of only 57 schools in the nation that ended up receiving that work. We partnered with our community colleges, Brightpoint, was Tyler, now Brightpoint, and Reynolds, to try and change and remove barriers for community colleges or students from non-traditional backgrounds to come through and succeed in science, but not by intervening with students, intervening with other elements. We developed a three-pronged approach. One involved faculty development, which is what you're going to hear about today. The other involved building community around the sciences, which is our science hub. You'll hear a little bit about that today. And the other was about kind of creating a better communication bridge between our community colleges and VCU. And that project resulted in the hire of Elizabeth Heck, who's at the back there, who actually goes out and spends time on our community college campuses trying to increase advising and better prepare our students to make their transition here. We're not going to tell you too much about that project today, but I just wanted to give Elizabeth a shout out. So I'm going to hand over to our program director, Allison Johnson, and she is going to get us started with some of the data that we've been able to gather over 5 years.
Thanks, Sarah. Thank you, everybody, for coming. We didn't know what would happen with being the first session of the day, and I'm overwhelmed with how many people are here. It's a little bit intimidating, just to be honest. We've progressively moved talking about our data through some STEM education meetings. We spoke to the Department of Biology in December, and this is now a broader VCU audience, so it's totally exciting to be here. I'm Allison Johnson. I'm an associate professor in VCU Life Sciences, and I work in the bioinformatics program. I know many colleagues in the college, and there's people here who aren't in the college, as you know, more than me. And it's a pleasure to work and to be able to impact classrooms in VCU at the scale that we'll show you today. I'm going to be speaking with Dee Jennings, who's an associate or full professor, in the Department of Biology, and she has some CHS specific survey data that she'll be sharing with you today. So I'm going to show you a little bit more specific data. Sarah has introduced you to a problem in the student success, retention, persistence of students from non-majority populations. These graphs show differences in grade course outcomes that can affect different populations. So DFW is simply the percent of students that get a grade of a D, an F, or withdraw from a class. In the left panel, we show a generic STEM course. This is actually real data, but a generic STEM course on the left, a second generic STEM course in the middle, and a humanities course on the right. And you don't know the scale of how students are impacted differentially unless you look at data like this. So we've started to share data of differential outcomes for students because you need to know this to be able to understand there's a problem. It's pretty shocking that we have courses that are 10 to 20 to more percent rates of grades of Ds and Fs and Ws for minority population students. This can be true for first generation students. This can be true for transfer students. This can be true to students with low socioeconomic situation because they have parts of their life that they're, really challenged to be able to participate equally in school. And so this is what we're trying to address. I think we can all understand that this is a problem. So our team takes this philosophy to heart, that this is our mission. You may agree or may not agree with this, but this is the work that we're trying to do through the grant. That DFW rates are not something that points to an individual instructor, but they're a systemic problem and we can find ways to address them. You know that we are a large urban campus with sometimes siloed institutions, and we would just want to work better and across our disciplines to be able to have a positive impact. The speaker that you heard about tomorrow, Nate Brown, so there's a reference in the lower right-hand corner of this slide about a study that he recently published with some collaborators. So he's a math professor at Penn State University, and they have nationwide data for over 100,000 students that shows that as little as one grade of a D or F or W can impact whether or not a student continues and finishes college. We take it pretty seriously. We also see this as an opportunity. So we were trying to figure out what to do through the grant. You have heard our grant is transfer student focused, but we do want to impact the success of students coming from community colleges, as well as all the students at VCU to be able to proceed through to graduation. So the education literature offers now substantial support for the benefits of inclusive teaching on students' classroom experience, as well as their grade outcomes. Improving our classroom culture was our primary goal so that students could proceed through to graduation. A supportive classroom environment helps students develop a sense of belonging in the class, and that belonging can impact their motivation towards learning and academic achievement. So we now have data that shows that for VCU students, and that's what we're going to share with you today. We believe that faculty set the culture of the classroom, and for some of our populations, the classroom interaction of a student with a faculty member is their primary way of connecting to the university. We have amazing student resources at VCU. We have lots of clubs and ways for students to get along, but we also have a significant population that doesn't engage in that way. And the classroom is the central focus of their interaction. So we created a goal to change the climate and the culture of our STEM classrooms to better improve and support our students. We were aware in 2018 that STEM faculty were under participatory in an Institute on Inclusive Teaching that existed at VCU at the time. I think by 2018, they hadn't operated that institute. There might be people here that were involved. Sorry, trying to look that way too. I think by 2018, it hadn't, the Institute on Inclusive Teaching hadn't operated for a year or two, and we re-engaged that to bring STEM faculty to this type of training and to impact our STEM classrooms. So there's nothing about this institute that is STEM focused, and there's nothing about our data that is STEM focused, but we've used this institute to bring faculty from STEM fields together and to engage in training in inclusive teaching. I need to step back in my story by one more slide just to set the stage here. You may remember that also in 2018, there was a racial profiling incident on our campus with School of the Arts visiting assistant professor, and the students posted flyers making certain requests of our community. One of those requests was that our faculty use an inclusive teaching statement to communicate with students about what faculty were doing in the classroom. And it was like, I'm in Harris Hall, and it was a flyer posted in the stairwell. And we decided to do that. So we're going to have many examples here of how we've listened to students and and tried to incorporate what they're asking for into the work that we're doing. And this is one of the primary motivations. So you're going to hear about inclusive statements, you're going to hear about inclusive teaching statements, and you're going to hear about some ways that these are sort of generic, maybe sponsored by departments versus something individual written by a person. The differences in those things make a difference, and it's one of the pieces of data that you'll see. So we have 3 data sets that we're going to share with you. We started back in fall 2019 with a survey of STEM students. It was at VCU and our partner community college campuses, and the data that we'll show you is specific to VCU, as well as STEM faculty at those 3 institutions. We surveyed them about what they thought inclusion was, and there's significant differences between the responses of students and the responses of faculty. So that was our first step in learning what students wanted in terms of how we would approach inclusive teaching. We have had several cohorts of an Institute on Inclusive Teaching go through our program. So the major data set that we'll show you was collected last year with 40 participants in the Institute, including 25 who were in the College of Humanities and Sciences Leaders of Inclusive Learning program. So this includes student responses from 63 classes, and almost all of those classes are actually from CHS. And then we have a third data set that was collected a year ago, and this is a CHS student-wide survey of inclusion, belonging, and retention. We sent this survey to CHS students in general. So while the middle survey on this slide is very classroom specific and a course instructor asks their students to participate in this survey to offer feedback specifically on this class, our third survey is more general, and we ask students to reflect on the courses in their major and their experiences related to sense of belonging and equity-mindedness and some of the characteristics that we'll talk about. So the student perspective when they're answering the survey might be different, and we'll try to highlight those things as we go through. So in fall 2019, this one's pretty simplified, but just to show you some of the differences in how students and faculty defined inclusion. We found that students valued belonging in the classroom and had an emphasis on that, while faculty recognized the importance of accommodations in terms of promoting their students' success. There were other response categories, so this is just to show you the shift in bars of those 2 things. We had open-ended responses to that, what students thought belonging was, and to ask them what they wanted in their classroom experience. So they just said 3 things. This is super simple, right? They want you to say hi, perhaps know their name if your class enrollment allows you to address your students by name. We know there's differences in enrollment size that sometimes can prevent this. They want you to answer all their questions. And I am probably the one that reads all of the surveys from students, and your faculty colleagues are amazing. And some of them are praised by their students for taking so much time to answer all of their questions. I think this was especially elevated during COVID and virtual learning, that we had faculty that did their office hours or student hours or question and answer sessions in a different way. And those faculty were praised by their students for helping their students learn. And they want us to treat everyone with respect, right? These are not complicated things. It's nothing related to the content of your course or the STEM content that, if I say this is an institute in STEM, it's not really. It's just about being a human and treating your students and creating a respectful learning environment. So we started to think bigger, and we've grown in our knowledge of what this might look like in order to be able to express this towards faculty. We spent some time talking to experts on this campus, talking to some colleagues through our HHMI interactions. We're part of a group of schools that works together to do this, through multiple cohorts of faculty that participated in the Institute, lots of listening to students and looking at the survey feedback. And we created this panel of 20 characteristics and behaviors that are expressed by faculty towards students in the classroom that might indicate that they're approaching that classroom from an equity-mindedness and inclusion perspective that's very student-centered and what students were looking for. You've heard that we surveyed faculty about this, right? We deployed surveys in classes and asked students about this. So there's some colleagues in this room who agreed and had trust in us to be able to ask students about these behaviors. I'll give you 30 seconds to look through this list. And we have some really amazing faculty colleagues. Students rate my colleagues so highly, and I'm the one that sees that data. It's really wonderful. So this is part of our survey, and we ask students to indicate how frequently their faculty instructor displays these equity-minded characteristics. There's a frequency of response, and then we created an index by averaging the response for the students in a class. And we can correlate that index, that number that represents a human, like that feels pretty dry, but we can correlate that with questions that we wanted to ask. So does faculty equity-mindedness behavior impact how students feel about a class? I'll tell you the punchline, it's yes. And does faculty equity-mindedness behavior impact student learning behaviors? That is a yes, and that is a huge wow. Like, we were amazed when we saw that. And then D will share some CHS survey data that answers the question, does faculty equity-mindedness behavior impact student retention in the major and at VCU? And the answer is yes. It's amazing. So here's the first set of graphs. I'll walk through one with you. So we asked students, how would you rate your connection to this class? That's the panel in the upper left on this slide. And the response categories along the x-axis are their connection plotted against the y-axis, which is the average equity-mindedness index for that student. It's positively correlated that students that rated an excellent connection to the class also rated the faculty equity-mindedness as high. That makes sense? And we saw a similar trend for students' comfort in participating in a class, for students' level of learning experienced in the class. So that's not grade, that's their perception of learning. And it was negatively correlated, as the direction should be, that stress is reduced as the faculty equity-mindedness has increased, right? So if there's a higher level of equity-mindedness, students feel less stress. So we call this how students feel about a class. And then I'm going to show you a graph with lines that are overlapping. And this was 6 different, I don't know if I have a pointer. Yeah, can you see that? My mouse on the screen. We have 6 different academic behaviors that we asked them about, and then looked at correlations to the equity-mindedness index. Students reported a higher level of studying for exams, participating in class discussions, completing readings, doing the assignments, seeking out help. That's amazing, and attending class. So when students felt that their faculty member expressed these equity-minded behaviors, they also reported a higher level of these really positive learning behaviors that we hope will lead to higher grades. We have not looked at grades. These are anonymous surveys done through courses, and we haven't looked to see if there is an impact on the final course grade. Sarah has some other stuff that she'll show you later about Matthew Scott's class as an example, but at our program level, we haven't looked at grade impact. But we have students telling us that they're more likely to do these positive learning behaviors when their faculty expresses some of those 20 characteristics that you saw. I need to say that these are common across all gender, race, ethnicity, and first-generation categories. So we did not see differences based on those factors. It is super strong. We did see that transfer student ratings of equity-mindedness showed more impact of these characteristics than non-transfer, like first-year freshman students. So there's some pretty interesting consistency, as well as the difference in the transfer student population. All right, now I get to introduce Dee.
Hi. I'm a little nervous up here too, which is really weird because I teach 300-seat classes. They don't make me nervous, but this does. Okay. All right, so I'm going to talk about the CHIS-wide survey. It also included responses about the frequency of equity-minded behaviors in the courses. And so our analysis of this showed that 16 of the equity-minded behaviors were significantly correlated with student retention. Okay, so what is shown up here are just 4 of the equity-minded behaviors that had the highest correlations with retention. Okay, don't get too worried about the fact that they're going down. Okay, so if we look at the bottom axis, it tells you what the student says that they were planning on doing. So we asked them, are you planning on changing your major? Are you planning on leaving VCU, or are you planning on doing both? And so that first one is that they're not doing either of those things. They're going to stay in their major and they're going to stay here at VCU. And so these ones were about, the first one is about incorporating flexibility. And what you're seeing on the x-axis is that same set of scores. This time it's not a mean, it's the average for that particular equity-minded behavior. And so the more the students reported equity-minded behavior, the less likely they were to transfer their major or to transfer from VCU, or to even consider doing both. Okay, the same thing was true of equity-minded behaviors that were about accommodating students with varying abilities and skills, sharing campus resources, which doesn't seem like it would be that difficult, and something that most of us probably already do, right? Has a huge impact on students' retention. And last but not least, just communicating what your expectations are in the course, okay? The other 12, do the math in my head, the other 12 also show the same pattern, right? That the more the students report that behavior is happening in their classroom, the less likely they are to switch majors or transfer out of VCU. Thank you. All right. So in addition to our interest, we're going to kind of switch gears here a little bit here. Our interest in the impacts of equity-minded behavior. We were also interested in how faculty were communicating about inclusion and whether that was linked to the student's sense of belonging. Allison's so much better at this than I am. Okay, so we're still in the process of analyzing the inclusion, belonging, and retention survey, but we're excited to share some of our findings with you with this data set. Remember, this is 1,044 students in the VCU College of Humanities and Sciences that completed the survey. These students came from 19 different departments across the college, and they all answered 16 questions about inclusive teaching, such as, faculty sharing inclusive teaching statements, perceived inclusive behaviors of faculty, which I just showed you, students' sense of belonging, students' connection and engagement in the classroom, and of course, students' intention to switch majors and transfer out of the university. So the results we're going to share next are about the impact of the inclusive teaching statement on students' feelings about the course in their major, and how student feeling about the course related to their sense of belonging in their major. Okay. So we found that there was a significant positive correlation between students' reported frequency of the inclusive statements in their courses in their major and the impact of the statement on students' feelings about the course. So that was positive. So when they were asked, though, the students, whether they thought the inclusive teaching statements that they reported being shared with them were generic or personalized, okay, 73% of them said that it was a generic statement, while the remaining 27% indicated that they thought the statement was personalized. Okay, so based on this, we looked at whether there was a relationship between the impact of the statement on students' feelings about the course and whether the student felt the statement was generic or personalized. Again, we found a significant positive correlation between students' perception of the inclusive teaching statement and their feelings about the class. So when a student perceived that the statement was personalized, they were more likely to report a positive feeling about the course. So in a nutshell, for most students, the inclusive statement, whether it's generic or personal, has a positive impact about students' feelings about their course. Something just really simple, right? All right. So as part of that CHS survey, we also asked students about how their professors in their major impacted their sense of belonging in their major and in that field. So the answer was yes. The faculty do have a positive impact on most of our students. Yay. So if the inclusive statement can have a positive impact on their feelings about the course, does that relate to their impact the professors in their major have on their sense of belonging in the major? What we found was that the impact of the inclusive teaching statement on feelings about the course was significantly positively correlated with how the instructors in the students' major impacted their sense of belonging in the classroom and in their field. There's a definite shift to a more positive feeling about belonging in their major. All right, now I'm going to switch it back to Allison.
So I mentioned that we request the faculty participants in the IIT to write their own inclusive teaching statements as a communication to their students about what they're doing in the classroom, why they're doing that, what their goals are, and how it might impact students. And we survey the students about that specific statement within a classroom context. So while Dee's survey was CHS wide and not connected to specific courses, the survey that we do through the IIT is partially to provide individual faculty with feedback about their inclusive teaching that is obtained from students. We get an overwhelming positive response when we ask about the impact of this personal statement on the student's sense of belonging in the classroom. And we have, for last year's cohort, 82% positive response. So these are written by individuals. There's a bunch of them in the room as a communication of why they're doing the type of teaching that they're doing. And primarily, it's also not related to the content of the course. We disaggregated that data, right? So we looked at those responses for a variety of race, ethnicity, and origin categories. The way to read this is there's a legend on the top. So we use the gray arrows to kind of represent the Likert responses, where if you see red bars or pink bars, it's that it decreased my sense of belonging. Or if you see bars that go towards dark blue, the inclusive teaching statement increased my sense of belonging. And when you see very little red, there's a couple of blips over here, but we get a very positive response with an increasing percentage of students from minority categories that are reporting the strongest impact of these statements on their sense of belonging. So that shift towards greatly increased was really interesting to us. Whoops. We have an amazing graduate student that has been working with us to analyze this data. Mashid Ahmadian, she's in the systems modeling and I'm blanking in front of you, math Ph.D. program. You guys know. So she was able to implement a multiple correspondence analysis to look at the differences in groups. We have a Mann-Whitney U test that shows that there are differences in groups. We use a definition of the word peer, which is starting to come into the literature and encouraged by the leadership of the HHMI undergraduate education program as persons who have been excluded because of their race or ethnicity, right? And we have to recognize that there are barriers in our institutions and structures that we need to eliminate. So peer is a term that we have started using. My time's up. And we grouped categories by peer or by white or by Asian demographics. And you can see that this visually represents that there's differences in populations. The ellipses represent 95% of the responses, and there's a bold point in the middle of each that is the median. So we know that students from different categories are impacted in different ways by sense of belonging in the classroom and want to work to continue to increase this for all of our students. This is kind of a summary slide. So we know that faculty inclusive practices impact student learning. We have seen this, well, we don't know by grades, we know by their reporting of the behaviors that they say that they will engage in when their classroom is an inclusive atmosphere. So we use these arrows to represent the direction of the correlations. of some of the things that we've shown you and shown you that it can be related to student retention in the major at the university. And I need to tell you, it's also related to faculty satisfaction. We asked our participants from last year to give us feedback about their experience with doing inclusive teaching and much diminished sense of how difficult this is. And there's a lot of improvement in faculty satisfaction in doing their teaching and in connecting with students in a different way. So we have all sorts of cool outcomes that are part of that. I think we're going to take a break and a breath and a stretch. And then we want to tell you about one piece about Science Hub that is, again, a student faculty connection piece that might be something that you'll consider participating in. So it's going to be D, but if you want to take a stretch and a break, it's a totally different shift in your brain for what we're going to talk about.
That was not a don't leave, don't leave. Just a quick stand up, stretch, sit back down again. All right, I'm just going to keep talking because we're on a little bit of a time crunch here. So if I can have you back again. Sorry. I blame Allison. What are you doing?
I'm just looking through the future. Okay.
Okay, so remember on that first slide where there are those 3 different icons, we're going to talk about the second one. Okay, so in addition to the work that we have done with faculty, we are also working with our Campus Learning Center and the wonderful McCall Coffee through something that we call the Science Hub. Okay, and I also have to give credit to Stacy Wall, who's here, who was part of the initiation of the Science Hub as well. Okay, so the goals here are a little bit different. This one is about collaboration to engage faculty and students in new ways and to strengthen the sense of community of faculty and students in STEM. Now I forgot how to do that. Okay, so one of the initiatives of the many things that we've done in the Science Hub and will continue to do is that we have created something we call Science Hub Student Hours. Okay, these student hours involve faculty from across STEM disciplines and are held in a common space in the campus library. Thank you, Campus Library, for allowing us in until our space is ready in the new STEM building. Really exciting. So rather than bring the students to us, the faculty involved meet the students where they already are for what would be traditional office hours. Notice that they're not called office hours. Okay, so this program has really gained momentum from the first offering, which was for faculty members in the basement of Hughes from 3 different departments into its current state where we have more than 30 faculty that participate from 6 different departments in STEM and a total of 11 shared office hours each week. So sometimes it gets really, really loud in there, but it feels great. All right, so I'm going to share a little data with you that we collected from a survey. So we wanted to assess the impact of our program. So at the end of the fall semester in 2022, we sent out a survey to the students who had attended the student hours that fall semester, asking them about their experiences, including the impact that attendance had on their sense of belonging. Just in case you don't know this, students are really bad about surveys at the end of the semester. So this is a bigger data set than we've had before. Best thing about it. Okay. Lost my place. Okay, so the vast majority of our students who responded indicated that they had an increase in their sense of belonging, right? 85% of them said that they had higher levels of belonging at the university, in their major, and in their professor's course. Okay. In addition, they reported an increased desire to stay at VCU and in their major, as well as and this is the professors like this, an increase in motivation in their professor's course. Okay, here's some other things that we found out. The students who attended our student hours also indicated that they felt more connected to other students. And in fact, sometimes they come as groups or hordes, depending on whether or not the Orgo test is coming up. They also found student hours to be less intimidating than coming to a professor's office. So 47% of the students that came last fall and finished the survey had never attended traditional faculty office hours. And matter of fact, some of my students that visit me there, I've never seen in my office, but I see them there on a regular basis. Okay. They also indicated that they were very likely to continue attending student hours if their professors participated. And that was 97% of them. Okay. We only have a little bit of faculty feedback. Faculty are worse than students about filling out surveys at the end of the semester. But they're overwhelmingly positive. You know, they said that students enjoyed the camaraderie, and it actually, you know, you wouldn't think that Orgo could be fun or math, but the students really feel, you can kind of feel the energy that's in the room when they're there. Okay. They seem less afraid to ask questions when there was someone else sitting next to them, right, that had already asked something. Okay. And it's a really great way. This is not for me. These are not my quotes, okay? But it's a really great way to get to know the other faculty in STEM, because in our buildings, we're in silos. But in the Science Hub, you are there with people from departments that you didn't even know existed. All right. Is this next one mine too or yours?
So we incorporated a list of takeaways if this is new for you and you want to think about how to change the climate of what you're doing or how to connect with students. Starting at the top, I think if you read the literature in this area, they always start with you have to raise your self-awareness about the students that are in your classroom and about the differences between our experiences and cultures. It starts with saying hi, right? And being open to asking your students for feedback. They'll tell you great stuff. We have a variety of ways. I want to say student academic advisors are probably your best source for somebody to sit down with and learn about the students in your major, in your classrooms, because they have the pulse of the students. There are these things called inclusive teaching checklists. I have printouts if you want a paper copy of one. This is from a journal article that is a resource guide on inclusive teaching. And I think if you take a look at one of these, you're going to see you're already doing a bunch of things on the list. It might give you some confidence to take a further step in this area. VCU has amazing student support resources, and we have the privilege of working through this grant with colleagues in student success. It's probably pretty unusual, I think, that we have faculty and staff collaborating for 5 years, and we're going to get 2 more years to work together to try to move the needle at VCU. Some of them are in the room today, and you've heard about, at least about Science Hub today, but sharing these resources with students is really important. They are overwhelmed with electronic communications from us and from a variety of other things. But if you put a slide up during your class and you say, hey, if you participate in supplemental instruction 6 times, you might raise your grade by a letter grade. That's what our data shows. McCall Coffee is right there, Campus Learning Center, right? We now have transfer peer advocates, is that the word? Transfer students sit in the student commons waiting for other transfer students to come talk to them about their experience, right? You put up a slide, your students are going to capture that QR code and a few of them are going to go by. I know from going to national meetings that VCU is rich in student resources compared to other institutions. And sometimes it takes us sharing those things just to filter through the noise of all that's coming at them, that this is a valuable thing for you to do. Consider creating shared student hours. Some of the things on the bottom are from our survey data. So these are things that are pretty easy to do. You might need some training or a colleague to help you understand what to do. You're going to hear from people today that have done some of this to be able to add some structure or communication or accommodation to the things that you're doing in your class. So we have experts at VCU and we have an annual institute that can help you there. I think we're going back to Sarah now. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, so my job is to share with you a little bit about what our faculty participants in all of the programming that we've done, whether it's IIT, whether it's Leaders for Inclusive Learning or other faculty that we've engaged with have kind of given us feedback. And what I'm then going to wrap it up and give you some kind of second order change that we're starting to see rolling through the college. So on the screen, you're going to see some quotes by some of your colleagues. Some of them are anonymous and some of the people were happy to have their photo put next to their quotes. But Mita Basil from Statistical Sciences and Operations would advise you to take small steps, listen, be receptive. Other faculty have shared that it makes their students less stressed and therefore them less stressed. We all want that, right? Inclusive teaching strategies to not only help students succeed, but promote trust and respect throughout the whole classroom. I think what Allison was trying to tell you is that all of the positive effects we see are more positive for our underrepresented groups, but they do not have a negative effect on any group. We specifically made sure that we were not providing interventions that were creating a different group to become isolated. It will strengthen your connections with your students tenfold, and they will be more engaged because they feel like they belong in that space. And finally, Matthew from World Studies, I think I would stress that the strategies are not that difficult to employ, in part because there are so many strategies to choose from, and you can choose those that fit with your courses and pedagogical styles, but these things really do matter to the students and improve the classroom for everyone. I have a short video here to share with you that Matthew recorded for me last year, which just gives you an idea of, oops, sorry, hang on. Do I need to share? I'm not the one sharing the sound, so I hope the sound makes it onto the Zoom. If not, the link is there and maybe you can watch it afterwards. So I had asked Matthew last year to give a little overview of the changes that he made from the course and how that resulted in success for his students.
And focusing on facts in my life, which typically happens. And the reason for that felt that that size, you're clearly going to have difficulties with needing expression, which can therefore lead to inclusive class. For that reason, I really want to focus on how I can implement flexible work policies without eliminating the standard the rigor of and better sense. So to make sure that the students take decisions for themselves in terms of context success. So what if you here and I wonder every other that, but Washington is flexibility, but on the rigor, this and critical program the students were surveyed on how they perceive how they impact their success levels in class, in their stress levels in the class. And I think what you can tell here based on survey that in each of these categories, over 70% found that these policies were having a big impact, or very, very helpful for achievement in their success within class, but also their stress level class, which is really fantastic. That only the policy that things that we talked about, that our students here at VCU in large classes within communities and sciences, we're finding beneficial as well. So, all in all, though, I think this is also important to look at, that policies are one of the things that I change on the spring to fall semester. Even my core side this year, but we policies are quite a bit of things that I changed. You can see that there was a huge shift towards student success, 10% of the drop in PSW rates, 10% rise in the number of days. So, policy, for example, how we affected. Great thing about them is that they also really adapt to any class, and therefore we should find ways to create and across the board. So I'm excited to see policies go, how better we can make them to maximize student success. But again, thank you for taking the time to watch this video, and thank you for your program. So inspirational, and allowing us to great place to talk about. So thank you again, and fantastic. Have a great day.
That hard to listen to, Matthew. What Matthew didn't put into his presentation was that what he actually did was make his course harder. He added a cumulative final that was optional. And I think, in his speech, he said he didn't change the rigor. He did. He made it harder. He gave an optional cumulative final that a lot of students opted to take. And that optional cumulative final significantly increased the number of students that were able to pass his class. And the shift from fail to pass was an increase of 66%. That was incredible. So, what he found, I believe what you said to me, Matthew, is you had some students that were struggling to always be there for exams and study because they were balancing work, and the cumulative final gave them a chance to kind of really zone in and study hard. And that was what gave them the opportunity to raise their grade. So I think we're trying to dispel that myth that being inclusive changes rigor. In fact, the literature says if you reduce rigor, they do even worse. Yeah. It was one of the KHS required human physiology courses, right? So it is a required course, and it is large enrollment. So it was one of the ones that causes troubles in their major. So HHMI challenged us in 2015, which was a long time ago, to create institutional change. As you know, creating institutional change is really tough in academia. Making any kind of shift is tough in humans. Humans naturally resist change. But what we've seen is we're starting to see that snowball rolling. Individual impacts that faculty are making is impacting students. Faculty are talking to faculty. Some units are starting to do training with their grad students. Some of our IIT participants or leaders for inclusive learning are doing trainings in their departments or working with junior faculty. We're starting to see faculty to faculty mentoring. We're even having discussions about how some of the questions that we have tested may be able to be the new questions in our teaching evaluations moving forward, so that we can start to really walk the walk and support the students that we say we do. So what you're seeing here is a Venn diagram. Change is very, very hard to measure, if not impossible. It's impossible to quantify. You're seeing but we are seeing indicators of truly deep institutional change, not just in the College of Humanities and Sciences, but across VCU. What it takes to keep that change rolling is policy. And it changes every one of you to be bringing everything up about inclusion and the importance of inclusive teaching on every committee you sit on, and always thinking about, are we serving the students that we say we do? So we have about 20 minutes left before the next session. We know a lot of people need to kind of move around, and so it's fine if we end this session early and create a break. But we also wanted a chance to create discussion. And so we would open it up, and I'm going to turn back to Allison to see if we can have some conversation.
I want to flip first to an acknowledgement slide. So there's a ton of people that have done this work in building the Institute on Inclusive Teaching and in supporting the evaluation in the program. We're really led by Jen Reed, who's in the VCU Wilder School, as the guiding voice on the types of things that we should be looking at and the ways to ask the questions. We worked extensively with Becky Durfee to develop some of the initial responses from students and faculty about inclusion, and with Masheed Ahmadian, who is just amazing. We have been working with her for the past year through this data analysis, and we were able to submit our first paper, which is about the sense of belonging data that we showed 2 weeks ago. And then the group at the top are the people who have run the Institute on Inclusive Teaching and developed that as programming, both with a Reynolds colleague as well as people that are at VCU. And Kim Case has supported this all along as well. So I do need to say thank you to all those people and our huge grant team that has supported this work. We have the seminar tomorrow. We have invited speaker Nate Brown. If you're planning to attend, that's at 2 o'clock in MCalc. And he's a, white male mathematician who can talk about his journey that is sometimes met with resistance by his colleagues for really leading in this space. And sometimes they don't understand what he's doing. So I think it should be a really good talk tomorrow. So back to the discussion. Do you have questions for us? Do you have feedback? Do you want discussion questions or do you need a break? This was a long talk. What are your thoughts? Anybody? Questions? Yeah. Hi. Okay, so I think this question is for Matthew. She has a specific question about how you manage the multiple attempts for quizzes. Was that your one? In a large online class. Yeah, so the best part about this is moving through this over a year with a cohort of faculty. I think my favorite meeting last year was a bunch of faculty talking about using Canvas to make your job easier to be able to manage stuff like that. Because the flexibility you can be like, no way, I cannot manage that. I can't put that on my load. And it's, there are some Canvas things we need to do that we don't have. If you talk to Kate Tibbetts and the token system that she uses, to make your job easier. Yeah. Like auto graded. Yeah. Judy. I think you could all hear Judy, but I have a microphone if somebody wants it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you have to build
Yeah.
a question bank. Okay. So it's not front work, but then it's done.
Sorry,
Tricia Smith.
I think this is another question for you. For the for taking a cumulative final, I assume you're probably dropping one of the exam grades from earlier. That's awesome. Do you have like an Excel formula or something that helps you do that for hundreds of students so you're not doing that manually? Like, how is that working? Oh, okay. Oh, I got excited.
Crestfallen. Oh, I'm so glad we provided a specific example.
I'm sorry, I was gonna just say, I teach statistics and quantitative reasoning at Bright Point. And one of the things, yeah, and one of the things I do, and a lot of us do, is we'll replace a low test with their final exam. And so he said manual, but it really is just a matter of going into Canvas and typing the new grade over top of the old one. It's not difficult. Yeah.
Don't you have to like scan through all the columns and then compare?
It's only 3 tests. It's really not that bad.
Had Excel though before.
Yeah. What that function is?
This is awesome.
Well, thank you, our community college partners. I've had the opportunity to meet some of you, so I wanted to, as a group, say thank you. I thought one of the stats about one of the items having a larger impact or lesser impact, there was definitely an impact of transfer students versus non-transfer students. I have heard anecdotally from students that coming from the community college that it was such a intimate, supported environment, and coming to VCU is a challenge. So thank you for leading the way of preparing them to come here, and we have some big steps to follow. So thank you for what you're doing with that.
I have to echo that. We're teaching the same students and it should be a continuum. And that's probably been the hardest part of our grant work because of COVID and maintaining those connections and building them, but we're still doing it. So thank you for coming. You were waving. Anybody else?
Rachel Hill has asked, are there any written comments from students from Asian or Middle Eastern / North African groups that had negative feelings about inclusivity statements?
By my memory, we had 5. So we do have an open-ended question where we ask about that. We had 5 negative comments, and I didn't go look at the demographics of the students that the comments came from. One was like, it seems like a bureaucracy. There was another student that said that made them feel a little bit uncomfortable. I didn't look at the demographics of that, but we do had 5 open-ended response comments, I think out of 233 that gave us some feedback there. It's definitely something we want to avoid. You want to yell? Yeah, that was the similar question from Rachel. So we ask for sort of a Likert scale feedback on the inclusive teaching statement. We get about 2% that are negative, somewhere between decreased, didn't impact me, that kind of thing. And we had 5 written responses. I think it was out of 233 that were some level of this thing is weird and bureaucratic or made me feel uncomfortable. Sure. I have both.
All right, my question is about the sense of belonging with the data that you put there. I think it ranked pretty high. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because there's like the physical space in the classrooms and then the sense of belonging in online classes. Like any comments on the sense of belonging in the in-person versus, digital world or?
Yeah, I don't think we know. We do know the modality of all of the classes. So we had 63 different classes, 100 sections. We did this over 2 semesters, with fall 2021 being more online than spring 2022 as people started to shift and bring their courses back in person. So it's a mix. And we kept that as a mix. I think that's kind of VCU's intention, at least as they talk looking forward as to the types of things that they want us to do. But We haven't separated by modality to look at the differences. So we want to move faculty scholarship forward to be able to publish, this is what it looks like in my classroom, and to have a variety of examples of that, of large enrollment versus small versus online and in person, to provide that specificity.
I was just going to add, the data set is absolutely massive. And the amount of questions that could be asked from this data set is exponential. There is only so much R programming that anybody knows how to do to, so if anybody is sitting here kind of wanting to ask a different question and wants to kind of take a bash at our data set, that is definitely up for grabs. So if somebody does want to look and disaggregate the online versus the in-person, go ahead. You know, we would love to get as much out of this as we can. Our goal was to re-release the student survey again in a few years and reanalyze it to see if we saw any additional shifts. There was a faculty survey that had the exact same questions, just from the faculty standpoint. It was issued, but the same week we issued our survey, VCU issued 3 to you. 52 of you responded to our survey. But it was the same week that the VCU online thing came out, and there was like a bunch of surveys come out. And so we just decided that it was not the right time for us to resurvey you all at that time. So we could reissue that survey. What we were looking for there was differences between student perception of inclusion and faculty perception, so that we could make sure that we could all be talking about the same things. Go ahead, Judy.
Actually, that's a very good sort of segue, because I wanted to make a comment that it's come up a couple of times that these things are easy to do. And these changes are easy to make. And with regards to the inclusive teaching statement and perhaps some of the student comments that might be negative, we have to be careful that we don't, in talking to our colleagues, just say, slap an inclusive teaching statement in your syllabi, that these, yes, we can do these things and they might be easy at first, but we have to be sure they're not performative, and that they're things that we follow through with in how we actually then teach the course. So if you have an inclusive teaching statement that you put in your syllabus, that then you carry it through and actually teach your course that way.
I actually want to add to that. I noticed that now that the school puts out a canned inclusive statement for us to copy and paste in the syllabus, it kind of defeats the purpose.
I think it's an inclusion statement, not an inclusive teaching statement, right?
That's,
This-
you know,
this-
drawing small distinctions.
know,
When
I
students
know.
get the
I
same thing
know.
from every person that's just copying and pasting it along with all the other things that we copy and paste. You even get the gray background, right? I mean,
Maybe, yeah.
so they know that people aren't really doing it. So I can see that some students might conflate the two.
Yep, and
And-
Dee's data analysis shows that. Yep.
A possible fix for that is to include the university provided one with all your boilerplate toward the end. And my personalized inclusive teaching statement is the very first thing on the top of the syllabus, right? So you can highlight it, but as Judy is saying, you have to walk the walk and it shouldn't be just performative.
Any other questions?
I missed the beginning of the presentation, so you may have talked about it already, but I'm wondering, given the siloed nature of VCU, what sort of inclusivity policies work best to reduce the siloing between programs at VCU? Do you have any insights into that?
Is this for students or for faculty?
Ideally, both.
Both. I think Science Hub was our example of faculty from different disciplines coming together to interact with students from disciplines that are very different in a shared space that is like office hours to have their questions answered, but has reset the energy and the interactions that are in that room, you know, to try to disrupt the silos that we have for faculty, it's such a pleasure to spend a year with a group of people. Now Judy's my good friend, right? Like we spent a year together, learning and growing together. I think everybody that's done this considers it a benefit of the program to get to know your colleagues that are from different units and across campus.
We're not siloed today. And that is why there's plenty of food today. And there's a reception at 4:15. So I hope you stay. There will be beer and wine. Here, I'm coming behind.
Hi, thank you very much. It's kind of,
Just closer.
okay, thank you very much for the comments. I thought in hearing a lot of the discussion, one of the coolest things was this idea of kind of a space and where students can learn from one another and faculty can come in to answer questions. And I know that this is kind of focused on the STEM disciplines, but maybe like in combining, for example, a writing center or like skills related to research methods and so forth. Is there a possibility or, or is it feasible to conceive of one that's for less like
Yes.
STEM-oriented courses?
Yes. Like we thought about putting pieces of paper on your tables today to collect what are your things that VCU should do to change the dynamic of how you're interacting. Yes. Like, why can't we do that? We can make that happen. We have to get the right people together and talking and some administrators to support it, but somebody to volunteer. Yeah.
It was a
Thank
it was a
you.
possibility because I find that in teaching more and more online courses, sometimes like what I have to do is send feedback to a student. Sometimes the students might disagree or something. So I ask them, please talk to your peers, see if there's another professor you might want to talk to, like just figure out what questions you have, and how you want to proceed. And oftentimes when I ask them to do that, they come back at me with like a thought out plan, and it's not like as defensive as it may be, right? And so like it's really cool to see that it changes their perspective when they get feedback from multiple sources.
Mhm.
And so I would be very interested in helping to lead this kind of thing where it also increases the in-person interaction with students. There's a lot of positives, I think. So I would volunteer to do that.
Thank you. That's awesome. It's a great idea.
Ellen noted that down on our next steps list. I was just going to say, Dean Ingracia mentioned Suzanne Barbour's talk about mentoring graduate students. And one of the things that she articulated was the power of at Duke University, they've created a space for the graduate students in the graduate school. And that is helping students who feel isolated in their disciplines where they are siloed find connections. And so I think that thread of finding a space where the students can interact with faculty in a safe space doesn't just exist at the undergrad level, it's at the grad level too. As they said, the Science Hub started just by booking a room and telling some friends that was where it was going. It took a lot to get space in the new building. We had to work very, very hard. McCall worked very, very hard on that.
Yeah, I just wanted to say about the student hours, we did ask students about their perceptions of the space and what they liked about being able to come together. And they really felt, we asked them specifically about the library for a number of reasons, but they felt that having these things in the library where they were already studying and what was a discipline neutral space was really helpful to them to want to go. They were usually already there or their friends knew where it was. And so that is something to consider for any next steps. Is the library is a great space for that.
So, hey, so you guys had the list of 20 items up earlier. I'm curious, one, if you found that any of those are particularly well correlated with belonging more than others. And then if I were to adopt some of those for like my own personal mid or end of semester feedback type surveys, I'm wondering what students hear or think when they hear words like belonging or connection or community, because I don't actually know if I'm doing it, how to do it if I'm not, because I don't know what they mean by those terms. And I'm sure it's in literature somewhere, but there's a room of a lot of people. So I'm not doing the research.
So we define belonging in the survey as I don't have it memorized, but a classroom environment that, we define it in the survey that generates a feeling that you want to participate in shared discussion. It's something that makes it concrete for students and a common classroom behavior. So yes, it's defined so that when they answer it, but in our survey, in the IIT survey, it's specifically connected to the inclusive teaching statement. I hesitate to connect that to the equity-minded behaviors and the student engagement, reduction of stress, all those things. But we see positive correlations for all of that, right? So I feel like there's a middleman of an inclusive teaching statement that for me mucks up the way the question is answered. But for Mashid, she's like, no, we can ask us. And Jen, we go back and forth about it. And we haven't written that paper yet, so I'm talking less confidently about it, but we see positive correlations in a matrix. When you put those 11 things, the students' feelings about a class against the behaviors that students are reporting in a class, they're all positively correlated with each other. And one of the things that we ask about is their connection to the class, which I kind of used as a synonym for belonging. It's not in the definitions of what belonging is. So a sort of spiral answer to that question. Jen and Mashid would say yes.
I'm going to unfortunately wrap us up. That gives us 5 minutes before our next session. It's also time for teaching. So I think some people might have to move. It was really great that we got to have a discussion. I hope you enjoyed learning about our work. A lot of the participants of our programs are going to be speaking later today. We will share our findings when hopefully we get published. And thank you for listening.
Okay, so we've got a few minutes break until the next activity. If you want to go and stretch and refill your coffee if it's still there. And we'll be back at 10:45 for the participant idea exchanges.